Good evening out there, students. This is teacher Prashant coming in with another video, and this is Linear Graph part 6. And in today's lesson we'll be learning what is a y-intercept. Now, what is a y-intercept? The simple definition of y-intercept is what is the value of y when the value of x is equal to 0. That's all what y-intercept is. Now let's go study y-intercept in details. What is y-intercept? A simple question. What role it plays in a linear graph? Now, y-intercept can be classified in two different ways. Number one is, what is the value of y at the point when the value of x is equal to 0? As we can see in example right here, we have a coordinate and x is 0 and y is 1. So we might have a value for y-intercept right here. Now let's focus on the second definition. The second definition is the point where a straight line intersects the y-axis in a graph, as we can see right here. So this is a straight line, and this is the point where it cuts the y-axis. So this point could have a value for y-intercept. Now both these definitions carry the same meaning. They are just written in two different ways, and the reason why I wrote this in two different ways is that's how they asked questions in the test, in the exams, in these two different forms. So we have to know what are they. So let's go start with definition number one. Definition number one says that what is the value of y at the coordinate where the value of x is equal to 0. So let's take a coordinate A. So we can see that in coordinate A, x is 0 and y is 1. Now let's have a look at the definition. The value of y when value of x equals 0. So we can say that since x is 0 and y equals 1, means the value of y is 1 when the value of x equals 0. So we can say that the y-intercept is 1. And we can also write that the y-intercept value of coordinate A is 1. Or we can say the y-intercept at point A is 1. See, both of them are the same thing written in two different ways. So at coordinate A we have the y-intercept value as 1. Why it is 1? Because at coordinate A, x is 0 at the time when y equals 1, which gives out the value for our y-intercept equals 1. Now this is the basic concept of understanding what is a y-intercept. Now let's do it on a graph. Let's go plot coordinate A on a graph. So as we can see, we have x as 0 and y as 1. So let's go plot this coordinate right here where x is 0 and y is 1. So let's write our point A. At point A, x is 0 and y is 1. Let's write x equals 0 and y equals 1. So when x is 0, y is 1. So we can write y-intercept at point A is 1, because at point A, y is 1 when x is 0. That's why the y-intercept is 1 at point A. Now, is A the only point where we could find a value for y-intercept? What about point B, where x is 0 and y is unknown? We don't know y. So what coordinate should we take? We can take any number to find out a value for y-intercept as long as the value of x is equal to 0. So let's take minus 1. So at this point the value of x will be 0 and the value of y will be minus 1. So let's write this point as point B, where x is 0 and y is minus 1. What is y-intercept of point B? The value of x is 0 and value of y is minus 1. So the y-intercept of point B is minus 1. So point A and point B, they are same in just one terms, and x equals 0. Because both y values are not same. So we have two y-intercept. At point A, our y-intercept is 1, and at point B, our y-intercept is minus 1. It means we can have multiple points on the graph where we could find a value for our y-intercept. Now let's go study a little bit more about y-intercept. What are y-intercept in linear graph? Y-intercepts are termed as different values of y. Why did I say different values of y? Because if you want to find out all those coordinates on a graph which carries out a value of y-intercept, you have to substitute y with different numbers paired with the value of x equals 0. Let's take three different coordinates with different values of y and the same value of x, which is 0. So let's write first coordinate as 0 and 3. Let's write the second coordinate as 0 and 2. Let's write the third coordinate as 0 and 1. What do you figure out in all these three coordinates? Let's give them a name: coordinate A, B, and C. So at coordinate A, y-intercept will be 3y because x is equal to 0 and y is 3. So y-intercept will be 3. What about point B? X is 0 and y is 2. So 2 will be the y-intercept of point B. What about point C? X is 0 and y is 1 at point C. So 1 will be the y-intercept of point C. Now we have three different set of y-intercept values right here. Now what do you make out of this? Why there are three different y-intercept values? There are three different y-intercept values because there are three different numbers as y. What does that tell us? That tells us that if you have multiple values of y, or if you have different values of y paired with the value of x equals 0, at every point you will find a new value for y-intercept. Please understand, y-intercept can be only found where x is equal to 0. So as many coordinates you have with different value of y paired with x equals 0, the more values for y-intercept you will find on your graph. Let's take 0, 3, 0, and -1. So we can see 5 different coordinates at our screen. It means we will have 5 different values for y-intercept. The first value will be 3, second value will be 2, third value will be 1, fourth will be 0, and please remember, 0 and 0 is called the point of origin. Point of origin means the point where the x-axis intersects with y-axis. And 0 and -1. So the y-intercept values will be 3, 2, 1, 0, and -1. So we have 5 values for y-intercept. You know why? Because at every coordinate we have a different value of y, which gives out us 5 different values for y-intercept. It means the more coordinates we have, the more value of y-intercept we will get. But make sure to pick a different value for y every time you pair it with x equals 0. Let's see how it works. So as we can see, there's coordinate A, coordinate B, coordinate C, D, E, F, and G. What does all these coordinates tell you? Every coordinate right here tells you that it has its own value for y-intercept. Means we have 7 different values for y-intercept on the graph because all these coordinates have a different value of y. So all these coordinates are basically 7 points on the graph which represent different values for y-intercept. So in coordinate A, x is 0 and y is 3. So 3 will be the y-intercept because y-intercept is the value of y when x equals 0. In coordinate number B, 2 will be the y-intercept. In coordinate number 3, 1 will be y-intercept. And in coordinate number 4, 0 will be y-intercept. And in coordinate number 5, -1 will be y-intercept. And in coordinate number 6, -2 will be y-intercept. Coordinate number 7, -3 will be y-intercept. So with the same value of x, which is 0, when paired with a different value of y, it will give out a different y-intercept every time. So we have 7 y-intercept at our screen right here. Let's go see how it works on a graph. Let's go plot all these coordinates on a graph. So let's go find other coordinates where we can find a value for our y-intercept. So I have chosen 7 coordinates right here. So let's go plot them on the graph really quick. So these are the location of these points on the graph. Now how does these locations relate to the value for y-intercept? It's very simple because at all these points the value of x is equal to 0. All these coordinates, they actually represent a common value of x, and which is 0. Now what is this x equals 0? Let's go join all these points with the help of a straight line and see what happens. Okay, so we have a line right here joining all the coordinates where we could get a value for y-intercept. Now please pay attention that this line has something common at every point, which is x equals 0. At every coordinate on this line we will have a value of x equals 0, so we can say that this line is actually x equals 0. So at this line, at every point we will have a value for y-intercept. And what are those values of y-intercept? Those values of y-intercept are actually every coordinate plotted with x is equal to 0. So all these values of y will be y-intercept. So we have 7 points to represent a y-intercept. Now please keep in mind, it is not just these 7 points where you can find out the value for y-intercept. At this line, every point will have a value for y-intercept. So that's why this line is x equals 0, and at the line x equals 0, every point will give you out a y-intercept value. So basically, what is y-intercept? Any point where x is equal to 0, the value of y at that point will be your y-intercept. It's simple as that. So every coordinate with x equals 0 will have a value for y-intercept. At coordinate A, we can say x is equal to 0 and y is equal to 3. Now this is where we find the value for y-intercept. So y-intercept is basically what is the value of y when the value of x is equal to 0, or the value of y at the point where x is equal to 0. So the y-intercept of point A will be 3. And the same concept applies to B, C, D, E, F, and G. Every point on the line x equals 0. Every point on the line x equals 0 will give out a value for y-intercept. Keep that in mind. Now let's go focus on definition number 2. Definition number 2 says the point where a straight line cuts the y-axis in a graph. Now please understand, what do you mean by a line cutting the y-axis on a graph? Now y-axis is also called as x equals 0. Why y-axis is called x equals 0? Because on every point on the y-axis the value of x will be 0. That's why we call this y-axis actually x equals 0. Now let's take a straight line and pass it at any random location on the y-axis. So this is the line I actually came up with. Now the point where a straight line cuts the y-axis. So definition number 2 says that the point where a straight line cuts the y-axis in a graph is actually y-intercept. How is that a y-intercept? Let's see where that line cuts the y-axis. That line cuts the y-axis at this point. Let's give a name to this point. Let's say A, and x is 0 and y will be 2. Let's write down the coordinate A, x is 0 and y is 2. Now at coordinate A, x is equal to 0 and y is equal to 2. So we can get the value for y-intercept as 2. Because if a straight line cuts the y-axis, it means a straight line is actually cutting the line x is equal to 0. So y-axis is also called x is equal to 0 because at every point on y-axis x is 0. So if you take a straight line and have the straight line cut the y-axis at any random location, keep in mind that that random location, which in our case is coordinate A, will have a value of x equals 0. And when x equals 0, any value of y paired with x equals 0 will be the y-intercept. That's why in our case y-intercept equals 2. So we can write that the y-intercept value of this line, so let us give a name to a line, j and k. So we can write the y-intercept value of our line jk is 2. And we can also write that the y-intercept point of line JK is A. And at point A, y-intercept is equal to 2, which is basically the same thing. In relation to the point where a line cuts the y-axis in a graph is the same thing, because when a line cuts the y-axis, it will cut the y-axis at some point. At that point, the value of x will be 0 with a value of y, which will give out a value for y-intercept. So that's how we relate y-intercept to a straight line in a linear graph. It's just the point where a straight line cuts the y-axis, and at that point we have a value for y-intercept. Now, why is learning y-intercept very important? Because it is a part of our equation of line. Now, what is the equation of line? This we will study in our next chapter, but let's have a look at how y-intercept is a part of equation of the line. Our equation of line is y equals mx plus c, and this c is actually the y-intercept, and this m is actually gradient. Now, if you guys don't know what is a gradient, I have already done a video on that, and I will put the link on top of your screen so that you guys could click and learn. And now, before we learn the equation of line, you have to know the basics, which are gradient and y-intercept. In this chapter we covered y-intercept, and in our previous chapter we did learn gradients. So for our next lesson we'll be learning what is the equation of a line, which is y equal mx plus c. Now they have a new equation these days, which is y is equal to ax plus b, which basically means the same thing. I like the old school, so I'll go with the old equation, which is y is equal to mx plus c. So thank you so much for watching, and consider subscribing if you are interested in more future maths content, and please do hit a like on this video if this video was of any help to you. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Teacher Prashant, and I'll see you guys again soon in my next video.